The common security and defence policy in Europe has been a long-standing EU aspiration. I think over the last couple of years we've seen really a sort of qualitative leap forward in its development with PESCO, with the European Defence Fund. And what we also see across Europe is a raft of new bilateral and, if you like, mini-lateral security and defence cooperation arrangements, which have, against the background also of rising defence budgets. So I think there is, at long last, some real potential for a development of a more effective common security and defence policy. But to be honest, it still has a long way to go before it's robust and effective and credible. Yeah, the EU neighbourhood policy started out with great optimism, but certainly since the Arab Spring turned sour, and also since the Ukraine crisis of 2014, clearly the European Union recognises that it has a much more challenging and difficult task in terms of shaping the neighbourhood, exporting good governance and building more cooperative relations. I suppose I've been looking particularly at the Eastern Partnership, and there clearly the big problem is now a confrontational relationship with Russia. Once the EU thought we could actually be partners in modernisation with Russia, and now it's quite clear there's a strategic competition for influence in the sort of eastern neighbourhood. So the EU now faces much tougher challenges in shaping its neighbourhood policy. Well, I think in terms of neutral states, the first thing to recognise is actually there are far fewer neutral states in Europe. Austria is still neutral, and of course that's part of its sort of state treaty and very much central to Austrian strategic culture. But I mean, if you look at the region that I'm from the Nordic countries, Sweden would now no longer define itself as neutral. It's militarily non-aligned, and the same for Finland. And I think what both Sweden and Finland, for example, have realised is that they really need to cooperate with their neighbours, with their EU partners, and to be honest, with NATO, if they're to both contribute to regional security, but also now to simply defend themselves. For Sweden used to have a policy of armed neutrality, but it's cut its defences so much that it really, its armed forces couldn't defend the country for more than a couple of days. So for formerly neutral countries in the Nordic area, where the Russian threat is much more in evidence, the focus now is on building cooperative relations with EU partners and, to be honest, with NATO as well through an enhanced partnership. So your question about neutrality, I think it's of less and less relevance for the world we live in. It's of less and less relevance, certainly for EU members who have a commitment of solidarity with each other. And to be honest, security policy can no longer be formed in narrow, selfish national terms. We have to think regionally, we have to think globally. And I really think neutrality in this day and age is it's an old concept that might have been relevant for the Cold War, but perhaps should be discarded. Thank you.